Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us. Today, we are going to be exploring a topic that I know many of you are deeply curious about, the spiritual journey.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is a huge one. What are those things that pull people to the path? What challenges do they face? And what happens after those initial moments of awakening when the, quote, ecstasy wears off?
All great questions, and we'll be diving into those questions using this book as our guide. After the Ecstasy, The Laundry by Jack Kornfield, it's packed with stories from Westerners who have dedicated years to their spiritual practice.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so let's jump right into it. The book opens with this really beautiful analogy. Just like grapes long to become wine, humans have this innate pull towards wholeness, towards spiritual awakening.
I love that.
It's so good, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that pull in your own life?
Absolutely. I think it's such a universal human experience that we can all relate to.
Yeah.
And to kind of emphasize this, Kornfield actually shares this Hindu belief that a child in the womb sings, "Do not let me forget who I am," before entering the world. Like this idea that we're all on this journey back home, back to our true nature, something that we inherently know but have maybe just forgotten along the way.
Oh, wow. I love that image of the child in the womb singing to not forget. And it makes me think of that captivating story from the book about Baba Yaga.
Oh, yeah.
The enigmatic figure from Slavic folklore who lives deep in the forest, almost like a gatekeeper to the spiritual path, right?
It's a great story.
Yeah.
What I find so fascinating about Baba Yaga is that she doesn't offer easy answers.
Yeah.
Like the young women in the story who seek her guidance, they have to be on their own errand, acknowledging the unknown in their quest.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful reminder, I think, that the spiritual journey is not a passive one, right? It takes courage to face the uncertainty, to step into the unknown.
You know, it makes me think, too, about what you were saying before we started recording about how you're feeling a little bit stuck in your own spiritual practice at the moment.
Totally, yeah.
And, you know, the story really resonates with that for me because maybe it's a sign that, like, those women, you need to embrace the unknown and embark on your own unique quest, you know? And speaking of quests and embarking on new adventures, Kornfield also talks about the role of suffering in prompting a spiritual search, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of the people he interviewed actually found their way to a spiritual path after they experienced some form of pain or disillusionment.
Right.
It was like these encounters with suffering really cracked open their worldview and made them start to question everything.
Yeah, he shares some really powerful stories about that. I think one that really stood out to me was the story about the spiritual teacher whose parents had a violent divorce when he was young.
Oh,
And it led to a really difficult childhood and feeling very lost and yearning for meaning. And then he had a chance meeting with this Hare Krishna monk, and that opened him up to the possibility of healing and finding that deeper meaning that he was looking for.
yeah, it's like those difficult experiences became his heavenly messengers, kind of echoing that famous story of the Buddha.
Oh, right.
Remember, the Buddha encountered old age, sickness, death, and a wandering monk. And those encounters just totally shook him to his core and really sparked his quest for liberation.
It's true. It's like facing those harsh realities of life can be a huge wake-up call. I think it's worth asking ourselves, what are our heavenly messengers?
Yeah.
Those experiences in our lives that have maybe shaken us up or made us question the nature of life. It might be worth taking some time to reflect on those moments and see what questions they raise for us.
Absolutely. It's a powerful exercise to go through. But it's not only about facing those difficult moments. Kornfield also highlights the allure of beauty and wholeness
Right.
that draws us to the spiritual path as well.
Like he describes it as this pull towards something greater than ourselves, this yearning for connection, this yearning for love.
Yeah.
The Sufis refer to this as the voice of the beloved. Have you ever felt that pull?
Yeah. It's so subtle, but when you feel it, it's so powerful. I think of like those moments of wonder and connection we experience in childhood, like that Zen master who felt a sense of unity with nature as a kid.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Those are the kind of things that that Kornfield is talking about in the book.
Totally. There's also that incredible story in the book about the Columbia University math student who had this really profound opening of the heart through a psychedelic experience.
Oh, wow.
And it completely shifted his perspective and led him to join a Trappist monastery, which is pretty intense.
Yeah, that's quite a shift.
It's fascinating how these experiences can be so diverse, right?
What I find interesting is that for some people, the call to awaken comes from moments of disillusionment with a life that on the surface seems successful.
Oh.
Yeah, take, for example, that story about the Chicago businesswoman who had the family, the career, the material success, but she still felt this emptiness, this longing for something more.
Yeah, it's like that external success couldn't fill that void within her, right? She had to look inward, and she ended up exploring all these different spiritual practices to find her own unique path,
Exactly.
which is so brave, to walk away from what society tells us we should want and pursue what truly resonates with our soul.
Absolutely. And then there are those, like that story about the Jewish woman who became a rabbi,
Okay.
and she actually ventured outside her own tradition
Hmm.
in order to find her way back to what Kornfield describes as like a hidden spiritual inheritance.
It makes me think of Bill Moyers, the minister turned press secretary.
Oh, yeah.
There's this great anecdote where he was asked to speak up during grace at a White House lunch.
Oh, my goodness.
And he replied, "I wasn't undressing you, Mr. President."
That's amazing.
He was following his own inner compass, even in a situation where the pressure to conform was immense.
Totally. And that really emphasizes this key point that Kornfield makes in the book. While exploring different traditions can be really valuable, ultimately, committing wholeheartedly to one path is essential for deepening our spiritual growth.
It's like choosing a path through a dense forest. You can wander around for a while, but eventually you need to choose a direction and follow it to see where it leads.
And as we choose that path, we inevitably encounter our inner dragons, those aspects of ourselves that we kind of have to face on the spiritual journey.
Ooh, I love that image. And it reminds me of that captivating fairy tale about the princess who marries a dragon that he uses to illustrate this process of shedding our defenses and facing our shadows.
Yeah, it's a good one. The princess in the story is guided by a wise woman, and every time she makes the dragon shed a layer of his scaly armor, she removes a layer of her wedding gown.
Wow!
It's such a cool image of the inner work involved, right?
Yeah. It's not just about seeking the light, but it's also about confronting our deepest fears, those parts of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden. What dragons are you ready to face on your own spiritual journey?
I like that.
What layers are you willing to shed?
A really good question to ask.
Mm.
And Kornfield goes on to kind of delve into the three main areas where we encounter those dragon scales.
Yep.
The body, the heart, and the mind.
Starting with the body, he explains how simply sitting quietly in meditation can reveal the physical tension that we hold on to.
Oh, yeah.
It's what's known as character armor,
Yeah.
which I think is a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's built up over years of just habitual contraction in response to stress. Have you ever noticed how your body reacts when you're feeling stressed or anxious?
It's amazing what we hold in our bodies. Like Kornfield uses the analogy of a clenched fist
Oh, yeah.
to kind of illustrate the impact of this tension. We may not even realize how tightly we're gripping until we actually stop and pay attention.
It's like we're walking around with a clenched fist all the time, and eventually it just starts to hurt, right?
Totally.
Releasing that grip, learning to relax, to let go, can bring such a profound sense of relief.
Totally. And as we relax that grip in our bodies, we also begin to open our hearts.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But this opening can sometimes bring up a lot of unexpected waves of grief and sorrow.
This is where it gets really interesting because he shares this really poignant quote from Ajahn Chah.
Ooh, I love Ajahn Chah.
Me too. He's so wise. He says, "If you haven't wept deeply, you haven't begun to meditate." It really speaks to the rawness, to the vulnerability that can emerge as we start to face our own pain and the suffering of the world.
Totally. It's so powerful.
It's such a universal experience. He shares a story about the Zen teacher who unexpectedly experienced deep grief during meditation. And he really highlights that this isn't just about personal loss, it's also about this growing awareness of the interconnectedness of all beings and the suffering that exists in the world.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming at times.
Hmm.
But Kornfield really emphasizes the importance of cultivating a tender heart, courage, trust, and surrender to really navigate this stage.
That's beautiful. How can we cultivate those qualities in ourselves, especially when we're faced with those really difficult emotions? What do you think?
It's a practice, and it takes time. But I think by allowing ourselves to feel the full range of emotions, even the painful ones, with compassion and understanding, we begin to develop this deeper capacity for empathy and love.
That's so beautiful. And then we come to the mind, which Kornfield describes as maybe the trickiest dragon to tame.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's so true because our minds are constantly chattering, creating stories, judgments, anxieties
Right.
that just keep us from experiencing the present moment.
Oh,
Have you ever noticed how your mind just won't quiet down, especially like when you're trying to meditate?
oh my gosh, all the time.
Yeah, me too. It's like the worst time.
Yeah.
Kornfield uses really vivid quotes in this section, like one from Carl Sagan, the famous scientist, who said, "I recommend almost dying to everybody. It's character building."
Oh, wow, that's a good one.
It's a really interesting quote. It's about how profound shifts in perspective can arise from confronting our mortality.
Totally.
It's like facing death can help us see what truly matters in life and let go of all the trivial things that consume our energy.
For sure.
And then he talks about the story of Nachiketa, a young boy who boldly seeks knowledge from the Lord of Death, Yama.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a powerful metaphor for facing our fears and seeking deeper understanding.
And Nachiketa's journey is so cool. He asked Yama for these 3 boons.
Oh, right, the 3 boons?
The first being reconciliation with his father, which really speaks to this need for forgiveness and letting go of past hurts. And then the second boon was learning the secret of fire,
All right.
which symbolizes the vital energy and perseverance that's required for spiritual growth.
And for his third boon, he asks for understanding of immortality, and Yama responds by offering him a mirror and instructing him to ask, "Who am I?"
So good.
It's such a profound invitation to self-inquiry, to look beyond those surface identities and discover our true nature.
It's so good.
Yeah.
What resonates with you the most from what we've talked about so far?
I'm really struck by the diversity of experiences that can lead people to a spiritual path.
Yeah?
It's not this one-size-fits-all journey, right? And I'm really intrigued by this idea of facing our inner dragons, those parts of ourselves that we try to keep hidden.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that spiritual growth isn't always comfortable,
Right.
but it can lead to really profound transformation.
Absolutely. It's a powerful message. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to be exploring what that transformation might look like. We'll delve even deeper into the nature and experience of awakening, so stay tuned.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the spiritual journey. So in the last part, we were exploring those initial sparks, those experiences and longings that kind of draw us towards seeking something more.
Right, those heavenly messengers.
Exactly. And now I think it's time to shift our focus to what that something more actually entails. What does awakening really mean, and how does it show up in our lives?
Yeah, it's a question that has fascinated me for so long. This idea of awakening can feel kind of elusive, almost mystical. But I love how Kornfield grounds it in the experiences of the people that he interviewed in the book.
Yeah, and he emphasizes this idea that awakening is possible for anyone who's willing to practice. He even quotes Dogen, the founder of Japanese Zen, who said, "The human mind has absolute freedom as its true nature."
I love that. It really suggests that awakening isn't just for like some select few, those monks sitting on mountaintops.
Right.
It's inherently within all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And then he goes on to highlight the Buddha's core teaching from the fire sermon.
Okay.
The Buddha said, everything is burning.
Oh, that's an image that really grabs my attention.
Right.
So what does fire have to do with awakening?
Well, the fire here refers to the greed, the hate, and the ignorance that fuel our suffering. And the Buddha was really pointing out how clinging to those things, grasping at desire and aversion, just keeps us trapped in those flames. Awakening is about recognizing those patterns and letting go of that clinging, allowing for that liberation from the flames.
So it's about recognizing what's causing us pain and then choosing a different path.
Precisely. And the really interesting thing is that the experiences of awakening are so diverse. They can range from these really profound mystical states to simple moments of insight. And Kornfield shares all these stories about people who've had these awakening experiences in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, like that woman who experienced a complete dissolution of self during meditation.
Yeah.
That sounds both intense and liberating.
Yeah, and he also mentions a man who had this sudden realization of no self while he was just walking in a garden, of all places.
Wow, it's amazing how it can happen anywhere.
Right. And then there's another story about this student who had this powerful breakthrough during like a heated discussion with her teacher.
It sounds like awakening isn't limited to just like the serene mountaintop moments. It can arise in the midst of like conflict and challenge.
Absolutely. And Kornfield really encourages us to be open to our own unique experiences, however they might show up. And he also dives into the role of solitude and silence in creating space for awakening. And he draws on examples from all these different traditions.
Yeah, you were mentioning before we started recording about how you're seeking out more solitude in your life.
Yeah.
And we often hear about spiritual seekers going off on like these solitary retreats, spending time in nature.
Right.
What's the significance of that in terms of awakening?
Well, it's about disconnecting from that constant stimulation of the external world
Right.
and turning our attention inward.
Hmm.
Think of Jesus seeking solitude in the desert, or the Huishol shaman who emphasized seeking the gods alone in the mountains.
Right, but I imagine solitude can also bring up a lot of internal noise.
Oh, yeah.
Like all those thoughts and anxieties that we usually try to distract ourselves from, you know?
Right.
What happens when the silence isn't so silent?
Yeah, that's where practices like meditation come in. They help us to kind of navigate those initial stages of inner chatter
Hmm.
and gradually access deeper levels of silence. And that can eventually lead to what's described as the silence beyond the mind.
It sounds like a gradual process of peeling away those layers of noise and distraction to reach that place of true stillness.
Right, and it's hard to put into words, but it's often described as this state of pure awareness,
Okay.
a stillness that isn't empty, but full of potential.
Wow.
It's where we connect with that deeper dimension of ourselves, the part that lies beyond that constant stream of thoughts.
Now, this brings us to that really fascinating Zen concept of the gateless gate,
Yeah,
which I have to admit, I always get a little puzzled by this one.
that's a tricky one.
What is a gateless gate?
Yeah. Well, it essentially points to the idea that enlightenment isn't about like achieving some distant goal or passing through some literal gate.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that the truth of our nature is already present right here, right now.
So it's not about striving to reach some future destination, but about realizing what's already here. I
Exactly.
think I'm starting to get it.
And there's this great story in the book about a Zen monk who goes on this long pilgrimage. He's seeking these profound teachings.
Okay.
And then he comes back to his original master and realizes that the wisdom he was seeking was always present in just their everyday interactions.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Right. It's a beautiful illustration of this concept.
Yeah, it's like we're always searching for something outside of ourselves when the truth is right there within us all along.
And Kornfield really emphasizes that awakening is an ongoing process. It's not a single event. And even those who have had these really profound insights, they continue to grow and deepen their understanding.
Right, it's not like you reach enlightenment and then suddenly you're done. It's more like an ever-unfolding journey.
Absolutely. So we've explored the nature of awakening, the diverse ways it can be experienced, the role of solitude, silence, and this idea of the gateless gate.
Yeah.
What stands out to you the most from this part of our conversation?
I think what I'm really drawn to is this idea that awakening can happen in the midst of everyday life.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be in a monastery or on some mountaintop.
Right.
And I'm also just so fascinated by this concept of the silence beyond the mind, that there's this deeper dimension of ourselves that we can access through stillness and presence.
Totally. It's a powerful invitation, isn't it? And it brings us to this really important question. What happens after awakening? Does life suddenly become blissful and easy? That's what we're going to be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. All right, so we've been on this incredible journey exploring the call to awaken and the nature of awakening itself. But now I'm really curious, what happens after those initial moments of insight? Is it all sunshine and rainbows, or is there more to the story?
I think you can probably guess what's coming next. Kornfield definitely doesn't paint a picture of, enlightened retirement where everything is effortless and blissful.
Right, I figured as much. He wouldn't call the book after the Ecstasy the laundry, if that were the case.
Exactly. And he uses this Zen koan that I think really illustrates this point. He says, a clearly enlightened person falls in the well. How is this so?
Okay, that's definitely a head scratcher. So even after you've experienced awakening, you can still, stumble and fall back into old patterns.
Yeah, that's the thing. Awakening isn't like this destination you arrive at and then you're done.
It's not a one-way ticket to perfection.
Right. Kornfield actually talks about this Buddhist concept of stream entry, which is a significant stage of awakening where you've really started to internalize those insights.
Okay.
But even those who've reached this stage, they still have work to do.
So it's more like an ongoing process of growth and integration, not a final destination. You're always learning, always evolving.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, Kornfield brings in these Zen ox herding pictures, which is this series of 10 images that kind of metaphorically depict the different stages of the spiritual journey.
Oh, I've heard of those. They start with searching for the ox, which represents our true nature.
Right, exactly. And then we move through these stages of finding the ox, taming it, riding it home, and ultimately returning to the marketplace with gift-bestowing hands.
I love that last image. It's so powerful, returning to the world, not to escape it, but to engage with it even more fully. offering our gifts and our wisdom to others.
It's beautiful.
But I guess that also means facing all the messiness and challenges of everyday life, too, right?
Yeah, it does.
The difficult people, the emotional ups and downs, all that laundry that Kornfield talks about.
For sure. Awakening isn't about escaping the world or transcending the human experience. It's about embracing the fullness of life with all of its complexities and contradictions. And I think that's something that Kornfield really doesn't shy away from. He shares stories from the book about people who have experienced these really deep insights, but still struggle with everyday challenges.
Yeah, like that Buddhist teacher who was wrestling with frustration and attachment, even after having all these profound awakening
I
experiences.
know, right?
It's actually kind of reassuring to hear those stories. It's like even those who have seen the light are still human.
Totally. We're all works in progress, always learning, always growing.
Always doing laundry.
Exactly. And Kornfield actually shares this quote from a Sufi master who describes their spiritual life as this ongoing process of opening and encountering new challenges.
Hmm.
So, it's not this static state of perfection. It's this dynamic journey of transformation.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. It takes the pressure off, I think. This idea that once you're awakened, you're supposed to have it all figured out. There's always more to discover, more to learn about ourselves and the world.
And that learning doesn't always come through these dramatic peaks of insight. Kornfield talks about this meditation master who didn't have these huge awakening experiences, but found freedom through consistent practice and acceptance.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's like the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Right. It reminds me of that Zen saying, strictly speaking, there are no enlightened people, there is only enlightened activity.
Oh, that's good. It's not about becoming this idealized version of ourselves, but about how we live our lives, how we engage with each and every moment.
Exactly. It's about showing up for all of it.
Mhm.
Bringing that awareness and compassion to every aspect of our lives.
This deep dive has been amazing. It has really shifted my perspective on the spiritual journey. It's not about escaping the world or becoming perfect. It's about embracing the fullness of life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and using those experiences as these opportunities for growth and transformation.
It is such a powerful message.
It really is.
And remember, you're not alone on this journey. Kornfield talks about the importance of community, of spiritual friendship, how those connections can really sustain us through all the ups and downs.
It's a good reminder that we can support each other's awakening, even in, the most unexpected ways.
And it makes me think of that final image from the ox herding pictures,
Yeah.
returning to the marketplace with those gifted bestowing hands. It's not just about what we receive on this journey, but also about what we can offer to others.
I love that. What gifts do we bring back to the world after we've encountered the dragons, after we've had glimpses of awakening?
It's a beautiful question to reflect on. And it brings us to the end of our deep dive. I hope this exploration has sparked some insights and inspiration for your own personal journey.
It definitely has for me. I think I'm walking away with this much deeper appreciation for the ongoing nature of the spiritual journey. It's not this race to the finish line, but it's this lifelong exploration of ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah, I love that.
It's about embracing the fullness of life with all its joys and sorrows and finding those little ways to bring more awareness, more compassion, more presence to each and every moment.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the spiritual journey.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for diving deep with us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those little moments of awakening in the everyday tapestry of your lives.